Indeed, in this session we will talk about transition that is organized before the transfer, and in the next presentation Jill will talk about the post-transfer transition, because transition and transfer are different things, as I will tell you in a minute. I don't have any disclosures, but I'm open for every suggestion. As I said, transition and transfer are two concepts that are often used in this respect and sometimes are used interchangeably. Transition, in fact, refers to the process by which adolescents and young adults with chronic childhood illnesses are prepared to take charge of their lives and their health in adulthood. Transfer, on the other side, defines an event or a series of events through which adolescents and young adults with chronic physical and medical conditions move their care from pediatric to adult care. And indeed, it clearly shows that transfer is going from one setting to the other, and transition has to do with the developmental phase that starts before but doesn't stop at the time of the transfer. Transition is also used as a term for a healthcare intervention. And when we look at transition and transition programs, we can conclude that transition are in fact complex interventions. And complex interventions are built or comprise different components that may act independently and interdependently. And it is like you are cooking. Sometimes you ask, what ingredient determines the taste of this recipe? Well, it's a combination of the different things that depends or that determines the taste. And it's also with a complex intervention, it's very difficult to say this or this ingredient is really the active ingredient of the intervention. Knowing this, we need to approach transition programs also from a complex intervention point of view. And a decade ago, the Medical Research Council in the UK has developed a framework how to develop and evaluate complex interventions. And bottom line, without going into the details of the framework, bottom line, don't start with a randomized controlled trial from the beginning. You need to do some preparatory work. And indeed, before we started our first trials, we tried to get a good understanding on what are the needs of patients. What should we put in such a transition program to really cover the needs and cover the objectives that we want to achieve with our patients. And I could go into lengthy tables to explain what did we learn from these studies, but instead we hired some professional actors and we asked them to use some of the quotes that we learned from the qualitative studies that we conducted, and I would like to show you this video. It is in Swedish, but it is with English subtitles.
Jag börjar nog ändå känna mer och mer att detta är hennes liv. Att hon måste börja ta ansvar. När hon var yngre så ringde jag hela tiden och kollade var hon var. Men det har jag släppt nu. Man måste våga släppa taget. Just därför är det ju också så viktigt att hon får information om sin sjukdom själv. Om sin behandling.
Det har varit jättebra på barnkliniken. Man känner alla där och det är som hemma liksom. På vuxenmottagningen så är allt så himla nytt. Nya sjuksköterskor, nya läkare, ny mottagning. Ja, men ett helt nytt sjukhus. Så jag tror att det kanske kommer ta ett tag innan man vänjer sig. Och känner sig bekväm och slutar oroa sig inför allt det nya.
Jag tycker det är jättesvårt att släppa taget. Jag har ju tagit hand om alla besök, mediciner och uppföljningar ända sedan han var liten. Och nu ska han gå själv. Jag menar, Bara för att han är vuxen nu kan de inte förvänta sig att han kan allt.
Förra året satt det bara en massa småbarn i väntrummet. Jag tänkte bara, vad gör jag här? Jag vill känna mig mer som en vuxen. Få mer ansvar, ha koll. Mamma och pappa har ju vetat mer om mig än vad jag själv har gjort. Det är de som jämt har haft kontakt med läkaren. Jag tog bara mina tabletter och gjorde som de sa.
Det var typ på sista besöket som läkaren sa så här: ja, det här är ditt sista besök hos oss. Jag visste inte ens att jag behövde fortsätta. Så att när jag kom till vuxenmottagningen så var allt rätt oklart. Jag visste till exempel inte om mamma och pappa fick följa med in till läkaren. Det har de ju alltid gjort förr. Och ja, så jag hängde bara med och vågade väl inte riktigt fråga, tror jag.
Vad ska hon tänka på om hon ska resa eller om hon blir sjuk? Och jag har ju inte heller alla svar. Det är svårt att vara ett stöd då. Vad ska hon göra om hon har glömt att ta sin medicin? Det är många sådana saker som inte jag vet. Kan hon få barn? Det är en sak som jag vet att hon oroar sig för själv och inte har vågat fråga läkaren. Och jag undrar ju också, hur påverkar en sån sak hälsan? Det oroar jag ju inte henne med, men jag vet faktiskt inte vem jag ska prata med om det.
Nu vill jag att läkaren ska prata med och lyssna på mig. Det är mitt liv, min kropp. Jag vill inte att de bara ska undersöka mitt hjärta utan faktiskt se mig som en person också. Jag vill vara den som vet saker om mig själv och sen kan dela det med mamma, pappa, kompisar, lärare och så.
Jag önskar att jag hade fått vara mer delaktig i processen. Att jag hade fått information av vården om hur och när överföringen skulle ske så att jag och min son, att vi tillsammans hade kunnat bestämma om det här var något han kunde klara av själv eller inte. Helst skulle jag vilja fortsätta att sitta med in hos läkaren, men att jag sitter där tyst. Ja. Samtidigt så vill jag inte tjata på honom, för jag tror att mitt tjat gör att han inte berättar allt för mig.
Innan har mamma bara sagt att jag inte får ta ut mig för mycket i gympan, men jag har inte fattat varför. Är det för att jag blir trött? Är det för att jag är sjuk? Eller är det för att jag har dålig kondis och därför inte kan träna så mycket?
Fast det kanske är bra i och för sig att mamma lär sig släppa på kontrollen lite. Hon blir jämt jätteorolig så fort jag ska träna för att det ska hända något. Vilket jag fattar. Men jag måste ju också få lära mig att ta hand om mig själv. Jag är inget barn längre.
So this is a 4-minute summary of countless hours of interviews with patients and parents, that's for sure. But like I said, it helped us to understand how we should improve the care for these young persons. So the title of this presentation was Pre-Transfer Transition, What Works? And if you really want to know what the effectiveness of interventions are, then we need to look for effectiveness studies using very strong designs, being randomized controlled trials. So this is what I focused on for the rest of the study. The first randomized controlled trial on transition in congenital heart disease comes from Andrew Mackey and his group. This was the paper from the so-called Chapter 1 study published in 2014. What did he find in this study? The transition readiness, and specifically the domain of self-management and the knowledge domain, increased substantially over time in the intervention group. And at the end of the study, there was a significant difference between the control group and the intervention group. So intervention patients were doing better. Question here is, what was the intervention here? The intervention was one nurse-led one-on-one session with the patient for 1 to 1.5 hours. And during that session, they worked on the My Health passport, and they used that as a vehicle to educate the patients. Last year, the results from the Chapter 2 study were published, also from Andrew and his collaborators. This was a multi-site study. The main outcome in the Chapter 2 study was the excess in timing to get or to transfer to adult care. We know that people have to go to adult care and not everyone is getting there on time. To what extent can we measure the excess time, and is there a difference between the intervention and the control group? Answer is yes. Patients who followed this intervention were seen faster in adult care than patients in the control group. The secondary outcomes were knowledge and self-management, and also here a difference was seen at the end of the intervention group, beneficial for intervention patients. And when self-management was measured with another instrument, also there difference could be seen. In terms of self-advocacy, no difference was observed. Chapter 2 study, what was the intervention here? These were 2 nurse-led one-on-one sessions, also with a duration of 1 to 1.5 years, with a 2-month interval. And once again, the My Health passport was used as the vehicle to educate the patients. But Andrew, he didn't want to stop after Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, so he started Chapter 3. The recruitment, as I could read at clinicaltrials.gov, has been finished, but the data are not yet published. So probably in the upcoming months or years, Chapter 3 results will be disseminated. The primary outcome in Chapter 3 was self-management skills measured with the transition Q. And the intervention here, once again, 1 nurse-led one-on-one session and My Health passport to educate patients. And it's unbelievable to see what Andrew and his colleagues are doing, because he is also running a 4th transition study, the Just Track It. And here, the effectiveness of a smartphone application is investigated. Primary outcome, transition readiness, also measured with the same questionnaire. And the intervention comprises a 1 nurse-led session and the app, the so-called Just Track It app. And also here we believe that we can expect the results in the upcoming months or years. What happens in other countries? This is a study, a randomized controlled trial that is going on in the US. Principal investigator is Karen Usark. Evaluation of a web-based transition education tool, so also using technology-enhanced transition, primary outcome transition readiness as well, and main intervention web-based education. And almost finally, a study that is in progress in France, in Montpellier, together with the colleagues in Toulouse, transition from adolescence to adulthood. Primary outcome is quality of life in this study, and they measure this using the PETS qual. And the main intervention in this transition program is therapeutic education. So, if you ask me what works, well, we clearly have evidence so far from the 2 studies that have been published that patient education in transition is working. And probably also the upcoming studies that I just showed will, or hopefully, confirm this. Which is good, and I'm very happy to see that. At the same time, I'm also a bit concerned. Think back on one of the first slides where I said that transition programs in fact are a complex intervention. Maybe when we put a heavy emphasis on education, then we might face the risk that we don't put as much emphasis on other components of transition. And that's in fact the reason why we started this Stepstones project, and that stands for the Swedish Transition Effects Project supporting teenagers with chronic medical conditions. It is a generic intervention, generic program, but we started the first intervention trial in people with congenital heart disease. And since it is a complex intervention, we also made sure that the intervention comprises the different components. First component is a transition coordinator. One person who is the direct point of access in care for questions, for support. A transition plan that starts in the beginning of transition and is gradually filled out and completed until the patient is transferred to adult care. Information and education, of course, it should not be neglected, and that's also a cornerstone in the Stepstones intervention. Telephone and email availability. Information and contact with the adult congenital heart disease team, because they need to know who are the people and where do I have to go to after I'm leaving pediatric cardiology. Guidance of the parents. We learned from the video, the interview showed us that indeed the parents don't want to be put aside, and they are still an important source of information and support for the young persons. Meeting peers, because they often think that they are alone with their problem, and when they can meet peers, then they see that other people are having the same issues, and they can form a support network for each other. And finally, the actual transfer to adult congenital heart disease. These are the ingredients of the Stepstones intervention. And we deliver these different ingredients in 5 phases. We have a first meeting with the transition coordinator at the age of 16, second meeting at the age of 17, then we organize an adolescent day where they meet each other and where they meet people from the adult congenital heart disease team. We have a third meeting and then the transfer. A very important underlying principle in Stepstones intervention is that we rely on the HEADS interview. And HEADS is in fact the basic principle of an adolescent health interview. And it refers to home, education, activities, diet, drugs, depression, sex, and safety. These are core elements when we talk to adolescents. And if we are not taking up these elements in our approach with adolescents, then we are missing a big part of their life, and we face the risk that we don't have a fully understanding on what it means for them, and that we therefore also don't understand why they behave like they behave. The primary outcome in Stepstones is empowerment. We admit that this is a kind of an intermediate outcome. But we know that people who are empowered, that they are more knowledgeable about their condition. They present or they perform better health behaviors. They are better able to navigate through the healthcare system. Even mortality is related with empowerment. Therefore, if we can improve the level of empowerment in our patients, indirectly, we hope that we can have an impact on the other, maybe harder outcomes on the long term as well. So let me come to the conclusion. Pre-transfer transition, what works? We have evidence right now that educational interventions do work, which is good. We could assume that, but now we have the scientific evidence to prove. Several trials are in progress, and therefore in the upcoming years there is more to learn, more evidence that we will have to indicate that transition programs are worthwhile to invest in. However, transition is complex and multi-phased, and we need to make sure indeed that we also use the different components, the different facets of an intervention, of a transition, that we also use that in our transition program. Because if we only focus on one component, be it education or be it something else, we face the risk that we are missing very important aspects. Thank you very much.